This episode of the Creator Defrag podcast features Tony Valcarel from Shrapnel, and we start off talking about the early stages of Tony's career working at Nintendo, and then go all the way through to his current position, building out a juggernaut game in the Web3 space. The conversation was originally recorded in June 2023, and was originally behind a paywall, but we're now putting it out into the public alongside several of our other podcast episodes that we recorded last year. I hope you enjoy the conversation as much as I did, and like I said, we'll start off talking about Tony's history at Nintendo.
What was your perception back then of YouTube and the sort of influencer space and all of that sort of stuff? Like at that point, it didn't really exist, but I'm sure you were seeing bits and pieces here and there.
It was really interesting. At Nintendo, it was very much a moderation motion as opposed to a marketing motion, right? We had a whole team who was responsible for issuing privacy takedowns and all that kind of stuff. And we didn't have a team that was focused on like creating original content and finding ways to prioritise that out in the world, right? It was like make a trailer, put it up, and YouTube as a growth engine through creators anyway was really not a thing that we were talking about a lot. And again, like I was a business analyst, so I wasn't in the room for a lot of this stuff, but my observation was that was the kind of the culture around YouTube. And Twitch was like not talked about at all. I think it was still Justin TV when I started, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, it was interesting. And then when I moved over to Amazon, I would say my first, 2 years there, I was there for like almost 10 years. My first 2 or 3 years there in the digital video games team, it was still very much a retail organization. And so the motions were less about creative ways to engage the audience, and they were more about finding ways to engage deeply with the developer and align with them on things like allocation for pre-sale or when we can start running discounts on the product. And so a big part of my job was actually just like flying around to New York and California and so forth and getting Take-Two to give us, NBA 2K for 50% off before Christmas and stuff like that, right?
So talk to me a little bit, just briefly here, about what are the stakes in a conversation like that? Like you go to Take-Two and you say, like, we think this is going to boost sales a certain percentage. And they're like, well, that's going to mean that if the game's discounted, then we have to discount it elsewhere too. And like, I'm sure there's like, what sort of nuances in that kind of conversation?
They're really fun conversations, and it's really different depending on who you're talking to. Like I don't mind saying this because I like those guys and they like me. But the Take-Two guys, for example, they were like one of the best people to work with. I have a tattoo on my back of Claptrap that I won in a bet with their head of sales, right?
What?
And so like when you develop relationships like that and you're really close, it makes it a lot easier to do fun stuff. So like, for example, I use NBA 2K as an example because that ended up on the front page of Reddit over Christmas. I actually had a VP at Amazon message me on our instant messenger and be like, hey, is this you? Because I actually represented Amazon on Reddit and a couple other like big game forums at the time. And back to the point though, someone asked me in one of these Reddit threads, they were like, hey, Amazon Tony, are you going to sell NBA 2K as part of your Christmas sale for a discount? And I literally just called Max and Steve, the people that were running the sales group at 2K at the time. And I was like, hey, I got this ask from these people on Reddit, and I think we could probably like drive some interest around this. The thread's kind of popping off. And they were like, great, 50% off tomorrow. Just do it right now.
Wow.
And I replied to the guy and I was like, 24 hours, 50% off tomorrow. And it literally, someone created a new thread and it was like, Amazon employee creates discount on the fly for Redditor or something like that. And it was like on the front, and like I said, it was like 11:30 at night. I got this, it wasn't a Slack, but whatever the messaging system we were using at the time was. And it was like, hey, I looked up on the phone tool, you seem to be the only Tony in the video games org. Is this you? And I was like, yeah, my boss knows that I'm doing all this. It's totally fine. And he was like, huh, interesting. What's the impact been? I was like, we're selling the shit out of NBA 2K right now. So that was fun. But then you'd have other folks, I'm not going to name names, but you'd have other folks that were a little more protective of the price points and the brand, or not as bought into the idea of a life cycle of a game's price. And then there were some folks that were heavily motivated, honestly, by creating competition in the marketplace, right? And so we'd have developers that would literally come to us and be like, hey, we want your market share. At Amazon, we called it market segment share, to be X% this year instead of what it is this year, because we feel like some of your other competitors are leveraging their market share almost like as an empty wallet, right? Throw on the empty wallet. It's like, hey, you're going to do what we want because we have all the money, right? Yeah. And so there were some publishers and developers that had a very clear line of sight on that and were super easy to work with as a result. And then there were other folks that were like, shit, the biggest platform in the space is like very important to me, and I'm not going to do anything to jeopardize the relationship with them. And so like there was just a constant amount of, again, relationship development and proof of concepting, and we had case studies all the time. Like I keep going back to Take-Two because we had such a good experience with them, but we were able to really drive a lot of interest in the product and IPs as a function of being able to work with them really closely. The way I won the claptrap tattoos, we were at E3 and we were at dinner with Steve and Max, and Jordan is the VP of whatever there. I think he might be the CRO now. And Steve asked me how many copies of Borderlands 2 I thought we were going to sell. And I threw out like an absurd number. Like we'd been drinking a little bit, and he laughed and called bullshit. And I was like, sure, like and I love tattoos. I'm all tattooed up.
Yeah.
And I was like, Steve, if I do this, then you got to fly me to New York and get me a tattoo from the New York Ink guys. I'll get a character from the game, whatever.
Yep.
And we took a video of this and then shared it on social. I shared it on Cheap Ass Gamer was a big channel of ours.
Damn! So it was inked into the history of the internet.
100%.
Yeah.
And then we sold through the units in like weeks, right, with the pre-order units, and it was great. It was awesome.
Yeah.
And so we emailed them back, and they flew me out. They got the tattoo, and like you could actually, up until a couple of years ago, I haven't done it recently. You could Google like Amazon marketing manager gets claptrap tattoo, and again, there's like a Reddit post that the thumbnail is just like my back with like a claptrap tattoo on it.
That's so wild. I mean, such a cool story, but also the foundation of that, the fact that you were really just getting in the weeds, despite the fact that you were a relationship manager specifically with these companies, like you were really focused on making sure that those brands were aligned with what Amazon was doing, etc. You were in the weeds on Reddit, seeing this grassroots sort of momentum and conversation developing and saying, well, let's leverage this now.
Oh, yeah.
Like today, this hour, as opposed to being, oh, well, we'll set up a meeting and then it'll go through weeks of approvals and processing and all that sort of stuff. It was just like, this is an opportunity right here. And I think what's interesting about that is that at that time, obviously influence marketing didn't really exist. Like if we're talking 2011, 2012, it wasn't really there yet. The first brand deal I ever did was with Machinima back in 2013, I believe. Long time ago at this point. And that was, I remember the campaign clearly because it was the first one I ever did. And it just went nowhere. Like there was no actual benefit for the brand as far as I can remember at least. It was very much just, we're trying a thing because we see something here and we see someone like myself having a bit of momentum behind my channel. Can we leverage it somehow? We don't have a way to measure it. We don't have a way to track sales. We don't have a way to even track clicks through a link or anything at this point. It was just this like guerrilla marketing almost. And it sounds like, despite the fact that it wasn't an influencer campaign at that point.
Well, I was the influencer. That was great. Yeah.
Well, but that's so interesting to me that you converged on a very similar result to what influencer marketing does these days with those quick turnarounds on campaigns and speaking directly to a community. You just did the same thing from a different angle.
Well, I'll tell you that you talk about the attribution and the ability to prove what's working and not. That was actually a big part of it. Amazon's like incredibly data driven, and was actually more so back then. Like I was a marketing person there, and like you couldn't make decisions and do stuff unless you could write SQL to go get the data yourself, or you were like best friends with someone who could, and they would do it for you, right? And I just learned how to do it all myself. But the idea of being able to track the impact of those channels was incredibly important. And again, like so much of career growth is time and place and fortune, and being lucky. It just so happened the guy that Larry, my boss, was reporting into, is a guy named Mike Frazzini. He had been instrumental, and I think he's credited with the creation of the Amazon affiliate program. Like I think that was his claim to fame. And so he was very like plugged into that model and like very an advocate of it. And so if you go to Reddit, if you go to r/game deals like right now, you'll see that there are only 2 or 3 affiliate links allowed to be posted in that channel. And those affiliate links are actually Amazon affiliate links that get paid out to video game focused charities, right? Able Gamers, whatever the one that does the games done quick, stuff like those guys.
Special
right?
effects.
Exactly. And so I worked with the mods of game deals, and I said, hey guys, like I am an Amazon shill. I'm here to sell you guys things, but I will listen to you. I will advocate for the deals that you want. I'll go run them down, and I need to be able to track this. And so instead of me paying a human to like some human to get the affiliate dollars from this, why don't we just set up this charity thing, and any dollars that come from this subreddit will just go straight to these charities. And it worked out incredibly well. They're still doing it like right now as we sit here and talk.
Amazing.
And that gave me the ammunition, the firepower. That's why when the VP slacked me at midnight, I didn't have to be like, and like there's like no one knows I'm doing this, and like please don't fire me. Like Mike, the guy who like invented the affiliate program, was like, hey, we're leveraging this technology that I built at Amazon to scale into a new marketing channel. And by the way, it's working really well. Right. At one point, it was like 10 or 12% of our sales were coming from that subreddit.
God damn.
It was insane.
That's mental. For a game as big as like an NBA 2K.
It was nuts. It was nuts. And like I'm saying like digital video games, like all of our shit was coming through game deals. It was nuts, dude.
It's fascinating the fact that obviously being on the storefront side as opposed to being on a separate third-party marketing funneling to a storefront. Like you weren't working at game deals, you were working at the storefront. And so that would have given you so much more of a view into all of that data that I wish I'd been able to sort of see some kind of attribution for what I was sort of driving sales for back in, let's say, 2013, 14, because it would have been so powerful. And thankfully, where we're at with the industry today, those tools are still being developed in many ways, but they're much, much more available, and both brands and creators and the viewers themselves as well, their relationship to the entire sort of funnel of everything is just much more ironed out, which is a blessing, because I was talking with Scott Pitlick on another one of these podcasts, and he's the director of marketing at Ascendant Studios, but previously 2K for like 10 years. And he was saying that in their efforts to build out influence marketing and to get approval for that internally as well, he was having to have loads of conversations and focus a lot on the click-through from a creator and measuring that click-through, and then trying to find ways in their efforts to better educate creators so that their relationship was more streamlined on both fronts, finding ways to say, okay, creator, you also need to be thinking about the click-through here, not just us, because that's going to be vital when you're going to another brand and saying, well, I'm actually driving this many clicks to the website, regardless of whether they purchase or not, they have intent to at least.
100%.
And that's just something that the industry has been very slow on the influencer side to figure out, I feel like.
Well, you know what 2K did really well?
Yeah.
They have this guy, Ronnie 2K, and he's like almost like a cultural icon in the 2K game space now, right? Like he's the basketball guy. And they built an audience around him, and he is like a lot of times their point of interaction with the creators and with the different folks, and he's able to provide a lot of the insight and the data because he's on that side of the fence, but he's also working as a creator, out Shaq, sure. and so I've always respected the way that those guys do business. They're incredibly smart. But you talk about retail and figuring out like how to leverage data to drive sales and stuff. That's really the root of why I'm now at Shrapnel, right? Like
for sure.
The idea is that we want to make sure that everyone who's participating in the game is able to participate in the economy if they want to, but it's a pull, not a push, right? Sure. Like you don't have to. You'll be able to play the game like just free to play and enjoy it without doing any of that stuff. But if you want to dive deeper, we've got mechanisms for both the creators to dive deeper, but also the people who just love the creators, right?
Yeah. So let's zoom out a little for a second here and sort of say, okay, so we've got your background in the stuff that you were doing at Amazon and the sort of basis with Nintendo.
Sorry. And then I went to EA for a while. Yeah.
So you've got this basis, this fundamental understanding of this marketing funnel and the value in it there, and how attribution is obviously such an important thing, and you're sort of really living that every single day. And then you get to Shrapnel. Shrapnel, just for context for folks that aren't familiar, how would you describe it? It's a new game studio. It's a startup in many ways, but you've got talent from all over the games industry. It's a powerful startup, I'd say. It's not like a scrappy team of 3 guys that are sort of like working out of a garage, right? So just talk to me a little bit about where Shrapnel has come from and how you would describe the studio and by association the game that you're working on today.
Yeah, I mean it's the coolest place I've ever worked by like a lot. And it's when I was at Amazon, Mark and I were on a program called Twitch Prime Gaming. Was a big part of my career there. That was probably the coolest product I'd worked on. And Shrapnel is turning out to be like much cooler than that, to be frank. And a big part of that is the culture in the studio, right? Like one of the things I love about the studio, as you mentioned, is that I've been working in the game space for close to 20 years, maybe 20. I'm old, and I'm like one of the least tenured people at the studio,
Jesus.
Right? Like all of the leads, our CEO, our CTO, our COO, they've been shipping titles like Halo, Call of Duty, CS:GO. Our CEO is responsible for Blacklight Retribution, among a bunch of other things. And so it's cool to be at a place where everyone's kind of been there before. And so there's a high sense of urgency. There's a high bar. Everyone's like never satisfied and wants the game to just continually be better. But the level of tension in the office, it's like the healthy tension that you want, right? Yeah. It's not, people aren't aggressively, being real pointed with their questions as I've seen in some other cultures. I was at Amazon for 10 years. It was a very aggressive culture.
Sure.
And so, that's a big part of the DNA in the studio, I think. And it really, it creates an environment where people feel comfortable taking risks. And that's so important in this kind of bleeding edge space where no one knows what's going to work. There's no playbook for how to bring a Web3 game to market. And that's what I love, right? It's like mobile 10, 15 years ago. Like no one even knew what kind of mobile game to make. Everyone's porting PS2 games over to their PS1 games over to the iPhone, right? I like that. I like being in that space, but it's almost impossible to behave that way and activate efficiently as a team without a leadership team that is super aligned and also super confident in their ability to like drive the ship without having to be in everyone's shit all the time, right? Yeah. And that's super, it's like I said, it's super refreshing. We go into, I remember, I'll tell you another story about Amazon. I remember going into a budgeting meeting one year, and we were determining our how much money we were supposed to make as a business. And this guy I'd never met walked in, and one of the senior leaders was like, "Hey, this is Jerry, I think his name was. Jerry's going to create cloud gaming for us this year." Spoiler, like Amazon didn't do that. Yeah. Hey, Jerry, what do you think this business is worth? And he was like tens of millions of dollars, some absurd number. Yep. And the rest of the year, like the rest of the team was beholden to this decision that we'd made by this guy that like we really didn't work with a lot. And so like there was like a lot of stress to like figure out how to make up this shortfall. That was the 50% off NBA year. It was a fun year. But at Shrapnel, I've not experienced like that level of, hey, we've got a nut that we kind of invented out of nowhere.
Yeah,
and we're just gonna go like squeeze. Everyone's pretty open to revisiting numbers and projections and really making the right decision for the business. Like for example, from a marketing perspective, like my motion is usually like make it as big as possible, right? Like I want our game is going to come out in early access on the Epic Game Store in like December. I want like 1 million people ready to play the game. Mm-hmm. And the studio, all the guys at the studio are like, hey, actually, it's more like a bullseye on December, right? Like we want to have like X number of thousands of people playing so that we can like break it a little bit and like make sure that we're not flooding it in with a ton of people and have negative experiences. And that is such a refreshing mindset to have. Like, hey, like you actually don't need to bring everyone to the world in this thing because we want to build it right? And so that's really, I think, the coolest part for me is the focus on doing it right. Yep. Kind of independent of the financial business needs, right?
Right. The DNA informing the correct decisions instead of the DNA informing idiosyncratic decisions that don't necessarily serve the business.
100%.
And I think that's something that I certainly from the influencer side would argue that way back in the day when Nintendo was being a lot more hostile towards influencers and content creators and folks posting gameplay on YouTube and things like that, that was one of those situations that has had to evolve over the years where there was just a company-wide mandate of this is how things are, but there wasn't necessarily the back and forth conversation happening, as far as I was concerned at least, with the community and with other brands that were in the space saying, actually, there's value here. How can we tap into that, right? But it sounds like you guys have established a company culture and a foundation and a DNA, which means that nothing is off the table in that regard. And you can question something and say, okay, well, this is the way things are, but should it be that way? And maybe there's a better path, right?
One of the coolest stories that we tell around the studio, Colin Ferran is our creative director. He was leading the game team, and then I think Mark told you, basically hired his replacement, and now he's like leading creative, like all up creative for the studio. And he tells this story, he loves it. We had a creator in our Discord, one of our early holders that was making a bunch of stuff in our early creator tool, the Insignia tool. It's like remember the Fortune Halo where you could like make insignias and put on your weapons and stuff. And this person was making some crazy shit, right? It's basically like MS Paint on a web page, right? This early thing.
Yep.
But you can use layers. It's more like MS Paint had a baby with Photoshop, right? And this person's just been making crazy shit, right? Like really deep layered art, like images of like astronauts landing on the moon and stuff. And it's all super high quality. And in Discord one day, she was like, hey, I love doing this. And by the way, I've never used Photoshop, right? This is the only creative tool I've ever used.
Wow.
And here's this like list of stuff that I think could make the UX better, like my experience better. And we literally just like sent that out in Slack and like made a bunch of changes. And Colin always says, it's funny because at Microsoft or Amazon where before, there was often like you'd want to do something like that. And then you have like 4 meetings to say no, right? And that's one of those things that you talk about, quickly synthesizing community feedback into action that gets represented in the game or the tools. Same thing, like, we work with our advisor Myth. He's a popular YouTuber as well. He came into the studio a couple months ago and like sat down and he gave Clint, our head of the game, some feedback on the gunplay. And like literally, like we had the gunplay designer or coder or developer or whatever, like sitting next to him, like changing
Furiously
values.
taking notes
And
right
no,
now.
like not even taking notes, like changing the values and
my
being like,
God.
hey, why don't you do that again? And like tuning it on the fly, dude.
Wow.
And it was really cool.
I mean, that's something I've screamed from the rooftops to a sort of empty, apocalypse-ridden city of none, like for so many years now, saying, bringing influencers into not your marketing campaign, not your post-launch campaign, not your post-launch support, your DLC plans, etc., but bringing them in as accessories to design early on is so important and can be so valuable. And so few studios have managed to tap that in the right way. We're starting to see it more. EA have their Game Changers program, and as part of that, they'll have, I forget the exact word, I think it's their essentially creator roundtables, where they'll bring a bunch of creators in to playtest the game while it's still all just gray blocks and nothing makes any sense.
Yep.
But you can still get a feel for feel in the game at that point. And you can still orient towards things that feel fun, even if it's not a fully rendered character or a sprite in front of you, right? And seeing EA make waves in that area has been really awe-inspiring for me. I actually, ages ago now, got to play their Battle Royale mode, Firestorm, for Battlefield, before it had been announced or before anyone knew that it existed. I think I was one of the first sort of 3 or 4 people outside the studio to even know that it was a thing. And I jumped in and I played and I was like, oh my God, this is both so good that I'm involved in the process here, so that I know that like later on in their roadmap, this is going to be a thing and I can potentially plan my content around it. But also simultaneously, I was able to give so much feedback that day that I felt like actually had a chance of being implemented. Yeah. And even more so, if I was able to sit down with them at the time, and this isn't how it was because it was a little bit of a different kind of playtest at that point, but if I was able to sit down at the studio like Myth did and just say, okay, can we tweak this variable now and actually get a feel for if it's on a scale of 0 to 100 and we try like 10 and 50 and 70 and 100 and then no, because also for a creator, so often you'll look at, let's just say gun balance, for example,
100%. Right? We talk about it all the time.
Yeah, I'm sure. And so from my perspective, I'll look at how a gun feels and how it plays and how powerful it might be. And I'll be like, oh, I just wish they just upped the damage. But so often that's actually the wrong move. Maybe it's that they need to make the reload shorter, or it's that they need to change the spray pattern. Or, I mean, there's obviously a million different variables
ADS
there, right?
is huge, right?
Yeah, exactly. And it's like time to go into your ADS, time to come out of your ADS, the sort of the feel of inertia of your weapon in your hand, all these different things, even if it's not a change that's actually affecting the damage of a bullet, maybe it's a feedback thing. That's something I've seen in so many games.
Like,
right?
and actually, we got that feedback that we were,
Right.
that we've been implementing, almost constantly since our first couple of playtests.
Yeah.
The damage response is like one of the things that absolutely needs work before we launch, right?
So
like,
much.
The shoulders moving when you get shot, or like blood spraying out, just all that stuff. Like, I'm not a designer, but like, that's kind of stuff that we're actively
100%.
figuring out right now,
And so as a creator, I might say up the damage, but I might be completely wrong. But being in the room and being able to try at least and articulate that there's something here that isn't feeling right, and I think it's the damage, but then to work with a designer, and the designer's going to know exactly what's going on there. They're going to say, okay, well, I can translate this feedback that you're giving me into the variables that are actually present in terms of how this gun might feel. And there's so much power there, and it's so awesome to hear that you guys are tapping into that and tapping into it early as well, because you're also in a position where, and I want to just do a little segment here to say, so the game is a shooter.
Oh shit!
It's a first-person shooter. Yeah. It's all good. It's all good. I'll get some context at the start so people know. Yeah. But so it's a shooter. And would you describe it as an extraction shooter?
Yeah, it's an extraction shooter. Yeah, 3 extraction points throughout the course. It's got a little different flavor of extraction. So
sure.
You load in, similar, you have a persistent inventory out of the game. You pick what items you want to bring in with you, and then you load in. And if you die and your body gets looted, then you've lost the items that you brought into the game with you. And similarly, if you kill someone, you can take their stuff. And throughout the match, there are 3 extraction points. This may or may not change. But currently, anyone can extract in the first 2 extractions. You go to the zone, and it counts down, and you get on the helicopter, right? But while you're doing that, like while you're waiting to get on the helicopter, like people can shoot you and kill you. And at the end, there's only 1 seat in the last extraction. We might change that. So we've had some really fun moments in our gameplay sessions, both internally and at GDC and Consensus, where 2 or 3 people are there at the end. They've waited because they want to have the most Sigma or whatever. And then they all get to the...
And that's the currency. Sigma's the currency,
Sorry, yeah,
right?
Sigma's the thing, the MacGuffin that you're extracting from the game.
Yeah.
And so they're all, they all converge, roughly the same time. And it's really fun to watch the battles ensue, right? Like two people are fighting, you can see someone just like hiding under a truck, waiting for them to be almost done, then pops out and kills them both. Or like they see that guy and find him. And it's been, it's created a lot of fun, like jump out of your seat and yell at each other moments.
Yes, yeah. I mean, we've seen this in the last couple of years. We've seen extraction shooters begin to be something, the term has even been coined. Like that's still pretty recent, I would say. I don't know off the top of my head if there's really been the tech to enable those sorts of experiences prior to the last couple of years, because there is so much of a reliance on the idea of having this economy external to the in-moment gameplay. Like you've got that persistent inventory system or whatever it might be, right? And so in having that genre sort of develop and find its feet, I think what's been really interesting for me to see from you guys is that you've been building in this space. You've been very clear that that is the game that you want to make and that you're iterating on every single day, but you're building in public in a way that I think is fantastic. There's so much community interaction going on there, and there's so much sort of openness about like, here's a little slice of where we're at, here's a little trailer showing current gameplay rather than it just being all CGI or something. Like all those sorts of things have been fascinating. I assume that's also been really hard because building in public is something that in sort of tech where you don't necessarily have a very passionate user about your sales front sort of store or something or whatever it might be, there's a little bit less emotion involved there. Whereas with a game, people fall in love with those pieces of art so quickly.
And hate is not the opposite of love.
Right.
It's just a very, very close cousin.
Yes, yeah. So talk to me about what it's been like in a world where gamers also don't understand game development and have to be sympathetic to the fact that they don't know what they don't know, and they've got a lot of passion, and that's fantastic. And it's when you tap it and it gets to that point of being love, obviously it's magical. But talk to me about how you guys have been navigating trying to build a game as openly as I feel like you have been, with all of those sorts of things already sort of swirling around.
Yeah, I would say, first, I got to give kudos to everyone at the studio, especially the folks that have been in the space forever, because it's like, way out of their comfort zone, right? And we talk about it all the time, right? Like the studio has a very high bar for demos. We actually, we're here in LA right now at this 3XP event, and we actually chose not to bring the demo down here because we want the whole team that usually needs to come down here to demo to be making the game right now. But that was one of those conversations where internally we're talking like, well, why don't we just like hire a street team and like send some people that aren't the producers and stuff to go run the booth. And we just like, again, going back to like making sure the bar is so high, like we're just not willing to do that until the build is in a place where like we don't feel like we need a technical human there, right? And that's again another decision that like I think a lot of studios would make, right? Like you see people with street teams all the time trying to do stuff, and we're really being intentional about it. So that on the one side there is a sense of like it's got to be perfect or it's got to be super right when we bring it out. And then I'll say on the other side, like the example about the myth coming into the studio or finding the community feedback on Discord and integrating it almost immediately. There is a high level of desire, appetite to lean into that, right? Like our head of studio, Don Norbury, he is like constantly looking for opportunities for the community to be jumping in and voting on things and participating meaningfully. And so, long way to say that there's definitely I talk about tension. There's a high level of tension between the desire to put content in as early a stage as possible, which is like my team is constantly pushing for that, right? Like, hey, let's actually, as I was sitting here, I think I showed Mark, who's off screen here, a video of our creator tool, our latest part of our creator tool being demoed internally. And it's just like a Zoom recording of our designer, like applying insignias to weapons and then watching them load into the game.
Yep.
And I'm like, shit, I want to share this like right now. We put this on Twitter immediately and they're like, no, like let's cut this up a little bit. Let's edit it up. Let's make it look like something that isn't just like a Zoom meeting. And so there's that level of balance, right? It's like, hey, like I want to get this shit out right now. Customers are going to love this. Players are going to love this.
Yeah.
Versus like, hey, let's put a little post prod behind it and make sure that it looks good, right?
But that's the thing is it's still so, and like you said, a lot of your more tenured folks at the studio, this is going to be very new to them. But I feel like there is such an effort with you guys to take something like that, and even though you're not necessarily putting it out in its like raw, unnamed sort of Zoom recording .mp4 version, right? Like you're cleaning it up a little bit, making it look a little less Zoom, but it's still going to go out.
Yeah.
And that's the thing where I'm a Call of Duty content creator primarily in my main channel focus, and I have never seen that kind of thing from Call of Duty, and I understand that they are in a position where obviously they're total market leader in first-person shooters. They've got to be so careful with every single thing, every little singular letter that goes through the Call of Duty marketing funnel has a series of approvals on it, right?
And by the way, there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah,
like,
totally.
like it's just different life cycle of the
Absolutely,
product, right?
yeah. But it's so refreshing as a creator to see a team that is able currently and has desire to currently be as nimble as possible. And it's just constantly trying to look at ways to say, okay, this insignia application to a weapon may, in isolation, not be a marketing beat that's gonna sort of drive 1 million sales, but it's still part of the conversation that you're having in an ongoing way with your customer, and then also by association with content creators.
Yep.
And I look at this, and again, this is something I've tried to preach for so many years. For me, there are different ways of tapping into an audience and giving them ways to be fans of your product. And for so long, studios have been purely focused on, are they buying the game? And when they're buying the game, what's their retention in the game? And are they then retained long enough to buy DLC or buy some kind of MTX or whatever it might be, right? My feeling is that in the past decade, we've seen a few examples of studios and also non-game IPs, Marvel's a great example, that have built out entire massive surface areas for their fans to connect with the IP in ways that are not just the sale of the key tentpole product.
Yep.
And it's vital. And it's vital not only for a fan, because it means that a fan can engage purely through cosplay, or purely through reading an audio or listening to an audiobook, or maybe they just go to an event where there's some kind of like games night at a local like tabletop store or whatever. Like there's 1,000,001 examples, right? It's just ways for people to interact with that IP and to be engaged that aren't just buying the game itself. But similarly, this whole lifestyle design also works incredibly well for content creators, because I've been trying to show studios for a while now that as a creator, it's really time to stop thinking about just being someone that is making videos out of their bedroom and start thinking as a business. And simultaneously, game studios and publishers and brands need to treat these creators as businesses too, and find ways to convince them that it's a good value proposition for them to invest their business's time and their expertise and their output into whatever product they've got, because it's obviously a mutually beneficial relationship, but the creator's feasibility of making content around a given game isn't a guarantee. There's zero guarantee there.
Yeah, you see people getting closer and closer to it, right? Like,
Yeah.
like Fortnite really, I feel like, led the charge in
100%.
in popularizing this idea of a creator program, right?
Yeah.
Where like you get paid basically an affiliate fee for people that you drive into the game. And I think again, like nothing happens overnight. Like that is just an incremental step towards what I think we're getting towards, and what the vision of what we're doing is, which is, as a content creator, being able to put an affiliate link up when you're talking and monetize your users and drive them into a game to buy cool stuff that may even sometimes like have your marks and logos. Like sometimes games are doing that, right? Like they have the Milo pack or whatever,
Sure,
right?
yes, yeah.
And then you receive some sort of share of that, right? What I'm really excited about is like that's not going to be a promotional motion for us. We're like, hey, we're running a campaign with you right now, and we're going to launch this thing, and we're going to curate it for a month. Mm-hmm. We will do that. Like my team will be responsible for going and building those kind of B2B relationships with other projects or like media people or celebrities, whatever, right? Putting the Nike swoosh in the game or whatever, right? But the core of what we're doing is really going to be focused on creators, and whether it's a creator who is like you that's been creating content for years and years and has an audience, or people that are just like want to make skins and want to make stickers, those folks are all going to be empowered, not just with tooling, but with financial incentive, right? Like that is directly tied, like almost in a variable cost way, to the success of the products that they create, right? So instead of just getting like whatever you get paid for a brand deal,
Sure.
You'll be able to continue to reap the benefits of the content as long as it's being sold in the store, right?
Right.
And I feel like that is really, really an important distinction. Yeah.
Because then I look at a game like Shrapnel and I say, okay, well, if I'm comparing the viewership I might get on Shrapnel to a Call of Duty, obviously Call of Duty right now, market leader, there's going to be a lot of views to be had there, right? Then I have to look at what are other creators doing. There's a lot of Call of Duty creators, so okay, maybe that tips things in Shrapnel's favor a little bit. But if you then come along and say, okay, if you showcase certain, for example, certain maps, for instance, that are UGC and you're promoting certain things there that folks can engage with, in your content, you could get 10 times less views than you do on Call of Duty content, but if there's still upside for you to benefit from the fact that you're driving all of this value to our game and our business, then the decision I'm gonna make is gonna obviously be influenced by that. And it's sort of extension, I think, of what Epic really successfully tapped into with Fortnite in building out some of that affiliate program and transforming it into saying, not only is this going to sort of have some financial upside for you, but it's also going to mean that there's a deeper relationship here between the creator and the business. And that's something that I'm always sort of pushing for, of course, because the deeper that I can be involved in a game's life cycle and the decisions that are being made there, the more also affinity I have for the game, and the more likely I am to stick around when it's going through the bad times, because I'm going to have more empathy for what's actually happening.
Well, and
there.
like emotional connection matters when you're creating content.
Totally.
Right? Like it's apparent when the creator likes the thing.
Yeah.
You know, one of the things I like to talk about with the creator economy is, again, some of the experience that some of my coworkers at Shrapnel and I had when we were at Amazon. We were part of the founding team for this program called Twitch Prime, now called Prime Gaming. And the idea behind that program was when it was pitched to Jeff, right? It was like, hey, we're going to get everyone on Twitch.tv to say the word Prime every day. Everyone will know what Prime is on Twitch.tv. Was the idea. And again, the idea behind that was like, if we are able to share the financial benefit of Prime signups and dollars generated as a function of that with the creator community, it'll be much more powerful. It'll be a great way to incentivize creators not only to talk about Prime, but to stay on the Twitch platform. Right? I won't share exactly how much, but when I left 5 years ago, there were literally tens of millions of dollars flowing through Twitch as part of the Prime subscription program. Right? And so that in and of itself, I won't comment on the recent stuff going on with Twitch, but even as they have interesting ups and downs in their public perception, it's really hard to argue with tens of millions of dollars a year in just funding for creators, right? It's you talk about like evaluating where you can do stuff, and so that was definitely the most impactful creator program or product that I've ever worked on, but it was so powerful. And so I don't know if you know who Gabe Layden is, but he was the CEO at Machine Zone for a while.
Yes.
And he's now doing some stuff in Web3. He's a great
I've been
guy.
following him.
Yeah, he's real aggressive, great guy. I talk like I know him. I've had like 3 conversations with the guy. But I've listened to him talk a bunch. And one of the most insightful things he's ever said that it's stuck with me for like 5-6 years now. He was talking about, it's probably 10 years now, he was talking about Game of War. And he was like, I realized that I would never be able to create content as compelling as what my users would create. And so I basically built like a chat room and then I built a game around that. And you can see that in the DNA of that game. Like every time you attack someone or you buy something or you have a milestone, you're able to share it with your guild and the other people that in the server. When I say share, I mean both like share the content and share the fact that you acquired
the milestone,
it.
yeah.
Yeah, and so it just creates this flywheel of like constantly wanting to create. In this case, the content that you're creating is just like the chat that you're sharing with people. But again, the key to that was the fact that there was some sort of financial reward happening when the celebration was occurring. In this case, Game of War was choosing to financially reward people in a guild when one of the guild members bought something, right? Like that was the mechanism.
Right.
With Amazon and Prime Gaming and Twitch Prime, the mechanism was we'll reward you when you convince people that watch you to try this Prime thing for free.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so playing that through, keeping going to the rest of my career now that I'm in Shrapnel, the fact that that's so baked into the DNA of the studio is incredible, right? Because like again with Twitch and Amazon, I'm very proud of that program. It's one of the coolest things I've ever built. But it was bolted on. Like we bought a thing for $1 billion and then we created this thing to go with it.
Right.
We're building Shrapnel from the ground up to support creators. Like we have a couple of designers around the studio that always laugh. I don't know if this is actually true, but they're like, man, we hope we only make like one map and like then the community just makes all the rest of them, right?
I mean, wouldn't that be great?
Yeah. And so, just like hearing that and seeing that manifest in the decisions that we make is really cool. Like it's a given for example, that when we work with artists, that we're going to split the downstream revenue with them whenever their skin is sold or transacted on in game. They get a piece of that. They get royalties like forever on that. So like we just released or created in-game skins for this thing called the SCU, the Sigma Containment Unit.
Okay.
And it's like this widget that you hold on the front of your character. If you look in the on the trailer, you can see it's like the thing they're fighting over. It's what you store the Sigma in. And we actually went and found some popular artists across the internet and said, hey, we'd love for you to come and make these skins for us. We'll commission you. We'll pay you, some amount to make the art. But then downstream, every time it's sold, you'll get like 1% or 2% or whatever the model was, right?
Yeah.
And that's just so much more attractive to these artists, right? Because they're like, hey, this thing that might be traded and sold for $1 bazillion, the person who made the $300,000 CSGO skin,
sure,
right? Like it'd be great if that guy was getting paid every time that thing was sold, right? And that person would be motivated then to create more $300,000 things, right?
So funnily enough, on that topic, I worked with the guy that did a lot of the Hyper Beast art for CSGO. I worked with him on some merch designs a few years ago. And I found him through CS, and I was enamored by the stuff that he had done there, and was like, oh my God, I just want to have his spin and his take on Call of Duty, on the stuff that I'm doing and all of this stuff. But it was very much like, I'll pay for a design, I'll pay for the rights to it, and then that's the end of the conversation. But if I had seen his creator output differently there, I could also simultaneously have been like, oh, well, maybe there's a different relationship that we could have so that you benefit from the upside of my benefit, and we succeed together in that regard. And that's exactly what you guys are doing.
Absolutely right.
Aligning values in that way. And so I was having another conversation on the pod with another creator friend of mine, Matt Cabuzio, and he talked about how he's started like automated YouTube channels in his career.
What does that mean?
So essentially just outsourcing everything so that he can step away from the project.
And he's just like content strategy. And
essentially, yeah. So he's the puppet master, but ultimately all of the parts of the machine run independent of him. And one of the things that I found really fascinating about what he did is so much of building those teams out to be effective and to last also was finding ways to incentivize people with equity rather than purely with cash payment. Because ultimately, if you've got an editor working on your team and you train them and you teach them exactly how to make banger YouTube videos and you're only paying them in cash, they might start making your videos blow up, but what's to stop them from just jumping ship and going elsewhere? Whereas if they've got equity and they've got upside as the business grows and as those banger videos get bigger and bigger and bigger, they're incentivized to not only try and continue to contribute to the success of everything, but also they're going to be starting to think about it as if they were a founding member of the team. They're going to be thinking, okay, well, can I outsource some of what I do in order to make even more output here?
That's exactly right. You talk about treating creators like businesses. And the way, in my mind, one of the most effective ways to do that is to increase the agency that creators have, right?
Yeah.
Like, so by opening up the business model in such a way that like you have more control over the licensing structure of the content you create. Do you want it to be a one-time fee that someone just pays for like let's say you build like the best door in Shrapnel, and like there's no reason to use anyone but Milo's doors. They open the best, they have the best animations. You could say like, great, if you want to use my doors in the map, it's like 50 cents every time you put a door up, right? Or you could say like, use my doors for free, and if your map blows up, then I get like 0.5% of whatever revenue the map generates, right? But that's your choice. That's, as a creator, you can go and broker those deals or have those conversations with amongst your creator friends, to your point, and be like, hey, I will go and I'll play your map for the next 3 months. I think it's going to be so cool. I love it. And if it blows up, then I want some, like you said, some upside from the revenue that's generated. And you as creators, both the creator of the map, the creator of the content set pieces within the map, and the creator of the content promoting or playing the map, you can all be part of that revenue stream as you see fit. You don't have to come to us and like ask us how to or permission to do that at all. And that's where I think a lot of the power, again, I talk about a creator community, like that's where I really think that this business and that model is going. The more choice that you can give creators to structure their content and their business in a way that is right for their audience and the way that they want to create content, the pace, the cadence, the tone, all that stuff, the more genuine it's going to be, and ultimately the more effective it's going to be.
1000%. I mean, it's a tragic shame that still to this day, I work with brands that don't understand that in any capacity, and they're intent on making things inorganic to serve, like we talked about a little earlier, those internal idiosyncratic company stances on things rather than serving collaboratively what might actually be the most mutually beneficial situation. And it drives me insane.
Well, you talk about the culture at Shrapnel, like that's one of the things that's so cool is like a lot of the the team came together around this idea, and again, baked like into the initial idea has always been this like modding creator community. And so there is just like, and they've all done it before, right? All the people that have like that made this decision have made things that were, either came out of mods or were heavily moddable at the time. It's so fun to see people who have worked within those large matrix organizations that have kind of a set in stone way that they do business be so excited to frankly like share the wealth and let people who meaningfully contribute to the success of our game and our economy be able to build a career out of it if they want to, right? Like that's the dream, right?
Yeah.
I talk about the doors, but like I'm going to feature the shit out of the first person that creates a door or a bridge or something that everyone uses, because it's such a great explanation of what it means to have a creator economy, right? Like two creators coming together. One guy's got a map. He's like, I want a map that has like 4 rivers in it. The reason I want 4 rivers is because I found that choke points around the rivers create really interesting tension and excitement. And it's really viewable, blah, blah, blah. And so like, then someone else is like, I've had that same observation, but I don't make maps, but I can make the choke points that are just incredibly exciting to participate in. Those people can come together and make really cool stuff.
And it's the same sort of thing that you'd see with, let's say you're working with like a Unity or something like that, or a bunch of engines will have this, where there'll be folks that obviously have they've created like starter assets for beginner game devs so that they can more accessibly get a full finished product, right? And so those beginner devs might say, okay, well, I don't have the expertise here to create a fully functioning door system, but if I can just go on the store and download either like a free pack or something that I can just plug in for some kind of fee that makes sense for me in my business, then hell yeah, I'm going to do that, because it means I can have doors in my game, and that's huge. I mean, so I have a fairly unique, I think, perspective on this, because in the Call of Duty community, specifically in zombies, so again, taking the COD audience, massive, zombies audience, smaller, still pretty big, but in there's also a modding community, much smaller. They've been around as a totally grassroots, almost an accident. It almost shouldn't exist, because they released mod tools in 2010, I think it was, 2009 maybe, for Call of Duty World at War, COD 5 back in the day. And it allowed people to make these custom zombies maps, and everyone was sort of like, how is this a thing? How do we have a map maker in COD? That makes no sense, right? And since then, there's been updates to that. The most recent one was with Black Ops 3, so still 2015, still several years ago now. And there's always been this fascination in the community of like, oh my God, we can make custom maps and experiences however we want them to be. But there are still so many limitations in place there, where map makers, for example, are not allowed to sell maps. It's part of the terms of service with Call of Duty. You're just not allowed to do that. Flat out, it's not a thing. And so as a map maker, it's like, well, I could spend 200 hours on a project, or I could spend 2,000 hours on a project. What's the upside going to be for me? Well, it might be that I build bridges in the community, I get something that I can put on my CV and things like that, on my portfolio.
Eventually get a job in traditional gaming.
Exactly, but if they were able to do that, if there was a clear way for them to be incentivized by the studio to do that full time, and they could just make a bunch of maps and profit from that, and also then obviously continue to support content creators like myself who want to play the maps for content, and the studio that's the foundation of all this in the first place, it's a flywheel that's just waiting to be utilized, I think. But all of these things are fantastic, and I'm enthusiastic about them, but implementing all this stuff is a massive technical challenge in itself. And I'd love to hear fundamentally, like building a forge system like in Halo 3 or an attempted sort of forge system like you've got in Halo Infinite now, that vision of the power of creation there, and even more so, a more in-depth version of it all. Where do you begin with that? How do you start to build out not just a game, but a platform for games?
Yeah, you hire people that have done it before first. That's really the important part. So people that have live services backgrounds, people that have built marketplaces or built really in-depth models that help businesses understand how a live service business should operate, right? How to curate content to make sure that people are finding it, how to create tools and mechanisms like ratings and reviews that populate in such a way that people are easy to.
So like the UX of it all,
the UX
flow
is just super important. It's got to feel, it's got to feel better than the AAA stuff that you're used to, because like otherwise you just go and play that stuff that you're used to, right? And so we have a huge focus on that. We have a whole team called the Foundry team that is explicitly focused on our creator tools. And within that team, we have like the developers and the designers and the economists. But we also have like just like several UX people whose job it is to make sure like the button is in the right place. And we use feedback from across our community. We're in Discord all the time, asking those people who are creating the crazy stuff for feedback. And so I think that's a huge part of it. So yeah, the Foundry team that we've got, the people that are like responsible for making these creator tools and deploying them, they are a group of people that have been working across games with heavy modding communities for years and years and years, right? And then from a technology standpoint, the gentleman who is building this platform, he was like towards the end of his, he'll tell this story the same way, but he's towards the end of his career, like getting ready to be done. He was the head of cloud for Microsoft for a bazillion years.
Wow.
And then he was the head of developer success for a company called Consensus. They make MetaMask. Yeah. And so he's built this like beautiful mind platform that feeds all of this, right? So like we're able to create digital entitlements, collectibles, things that you hold that our system will then read and then provide content for in the game. And that really serves as like the foundation for all of this, right? So when you create something in our platform, you can create all the stuff you want. Like anything, you can create anything you want, and there's no cost, and you can save it and whatnot. But when you want to publish it, when you want to make it tradable, sellable, when you want to monetize it, there's a fee associated with that. And that's our way to mitigate against like, the explicit content, right? Like, and so, if it costs you, 50 cents, 60 cents, you're not going to fill the...
You're not going to just waste money on silly stuff. Yeah, for sure.
And we have a moderation team too to catch people that are willing to do that. But
I mean, what you're saying with all of the power that comes from the UGC here, right? One of the things that my mind jumps to straight away is you're giving people so much agency in what they're doing. The stories that are going to be told there are going to be incredible. Or there's room for that in such a new way because, again, speaking to my Call of Duty Zombies experience, there are map makers that have made maps that have attempted to tell stories, but they've felt like they've been a little limited, right? And the potential that I feel like you have to say, okay, we have our own story here, but maybe if there's certain maps that really pick up that people are really into, or just certain storylines within parts of the experience that people build out, maybe that's going to be something that, and I don't know, don't want to speak for you here, but you could loop into your own stuff.
100%. So I don't know if I said this earlier, but the heads of the studio, the 6 people that founded the studio, they were all at HBO, and then AT&T bought HBO and said, we're not making video games at HBO anymore.
Okay.
And so these folks decided to spin up Shrapnel. Neon Machine is the company, but Shrapnel's the game.
Sure.
And these folks are like, they're Emmy and BAFTA award-winning people. They've made like films and shit. Our CEO, Mark Long, has optioned movies to Legendary, right?
Amazing.
And he's a published author, like all kinds of stuff. So we actually have a set of 5 comics right now that were written by staff at Shrapnel and edited and illustrated by like former Marvel people that, again, these guys just know from HBO, right? The guy, so I just made one of the next 5, like I actually wrote one of the comics.
Oh, sick.
And the person doing the art for my comic is the person who did all the art for Cable, which is the X-Men, the time traveling X-Man Cable. He's my favorite X-Man, right? And I was like, holy shit, this is incredible, right? And so talking about how we can play that through and like how we plan to play that through, we absolutely want people who are creating narratives and universes within our universe to be able to express that. And we're going to fund that, right? Like if you create the best story, the best map, then we're going to reach out to you and be like, hey, comic number 17 is coming out.
Yeah.
And we'd really like it to feature your
characters
your
your
operators, right?
Space,
and further, like, do you want to write that? Do you want to work with John Barber, who is an editor and a writer for Transformers and all these incredible IPs to make your comic in the Shrapnel world? And I'll tell you, it's really cool. It is like getting to do it. It is so fun.
Yeah.
Again, like HBO, they know a bunch of really interesting people. Neil Stevenson, the creator of Snow Crash,
yes,
he just hangs out in our office. He's like friends with Mark Long, and and I have to like keep myself from doing that every time I see him. I'm like, this is insane. I read your book every year, right? And he like gives us feedback on this stuff. He like gives us feedback on our lore and our transmedia stuff.
That is, I'm a massive Neil Stevenson fan,
right?
And so I've seen that he's on your advisory team. I've seen that, and I've been like, maybe the extent of that relationship is there's a sort of infrequent check-in where he's like sort of giving you some high-level feedback and then that's that. But the fact that he's involved to that extent where he's just there and giving you feedback not only on a specific piece of story building or lore that you might be working on, but also on how to deploy that in a transmedia sense, that makes me really excited.
It's super cool, man. And like he's friends with our CEO, Mark Long. He's like, Mark, I don't even know how to share this, but like, spoiler, Mark the other day pulled me into his office and he's like, hey, you want to see something cool? And I was like, yeah, sure, I want to see something cool. He's like, look at what we were working on when we were at HBO, and he showed me this trailer of the Snow Crash game they were working on, and it's you've read Snow Crash. You just said
Yes, yeah.
And it's the poon scene, right? It's like he's suctioning onto the back of a cab,
Yeah.
and flying around on his hoverboard and shit, and it's like it's all in Unreal Engine. It's like the coolest shit, and like him and Neil just hang out and talk about that shit. It's nuts, dude. It's awesome. It's so cool.
Damn, I mean, your advisory team is pretty stacked, I gotta say. Like, not that I don't want to talk more about Neil, but there's so many other big names on there. Has the story that you intend to tell, before we talk about sort of the UGC stories, but has the story that you plan to tell changed a huge amount based on what they've said? Or have they been like, you got a really great thing here, let's tweak it to just sort of optimize it? Or like, how's that gone?
That's a great question. I started a little bit after the Transmedia Bible, as we call it. Like, we have like a 150 page document that captures the story of Shrapnel, right?
Wow.
And that was done in collaboration with people like Neil and I can't remember the guy's name, but the gentleman who did all the choreography for John Wick is part of one of our folks as well. And then one of the creators of Arcane, the League of Legends anime, is one of our advisors. And those folks had like a strong hand in developing that 150 page document that describes what we are. And my understanding is that like the root of our lore is there's 4 houses or 4 clans or four families that have really taken control of the extraction and the production of this compound called Sigma, which is raining from the sky because the moon was hit by an asteroid. And so within those 4 families, we've had just a battery of stories emerge, right? We've had, within the families, some interesting like succession type stuff, that backstabbing and, families fighting with each other. And then within the overlord faction, or like the most powerful faction, right? The crypto bankers, the people that are like kind of shadowy, controlling all the finances in the world. They have like their own like Wetworks assassination team. Yeah. And so like my comic book, my part of the lore is like diving into that, like the origins of their private army, right? Mm-hmm. And then Mark Long, our CEO, his comic book is all about diving into the concept of using this compound for time travel and like how that might impact the world, right?
Time travel, I love it. Yes.
and so as we develop both the individual elements of the story as well as the overall arcs, these advisors are like, hand in hand with us while we're doing it. And it's really fun. It's just, like I said, I've been in video games for like almost 20 years. And I've gotten to do a lot of really fun stuff. And I've never gotten to do something this creative. And it's so exciting. And again, going back to the original question, I just can't wait. I'm so excited for Door Guy to be able to make a comic book in the Shrapnel universe, right?
Yeah,
it's going to be so awesome.
All about doors.
Right?
The Door episode. Like you've got like shows like, I'm trying to think, like Supernatural and stuff like that will just do like that gimmick one-off episode that's really goofy. And you've got that specific targeted piece and it's just all about doors.
Doors that time travel. You open the door, you go to different time zones.
I mean, why the hell not? So all of this sounds so exciting, and it gets me creatively really just fired up, because lore is also a big part of what I've done over the years. I've been a story-focused content creator. I've been a historian in many ways for the Call of Duty Zombies storyline, and just the prospect of just hearing that there's a 150-page lore and transmedia Bible, that makes my ears prick up, and I'm like, oh, okay. I need to see this. Like, or how it would have been over the years with Call of Duty is I need to reverse engineer the media that you're putting out so that I can create, and this is what I've done with Call of Duty, my imagined version of what that Bible is. But the fact that you guys have got that now and you're going to continue to expand on it, I mean, like I said, it fires me up. It just makes me creatively so curious.
Well, that's how we found you. Like, one of the guys at the studio hit me up and was like, hey, have you ever seen this guy? He did all of the lore and kind of story building around Call of Duty Zombies. And I was like, oh yeah, like I've seen a couple of his videos. This is crazy. And he's like, yeah, I just like DM'd him and he wants to talk to us. And so, that's the genesis of our relationship, is that, that transmedia lore building that you've done. There are few examples of people who've been able to do that well. And our goal is to be able to empower more and more people to make it more of a motion, right? A thing that is just kind of like things that people do.
Yeah, I really hope that through the work that you guys are doing as well, not only with Shrapnel, but just with the wider industry, you can really set some new precedents for ways that folks like myself, in a creator sense, can be empowered to interact with your worlds, and also just inspire some games to tell some stories they might not have been able to do before. I think that's going to be a really powerful effect for Shrapnel to have on the industry. So on that note, there are 3 things that I want to ask you to wrap things up here. Number 1, everything that you're doing, as far as I'm concerned, sounds cool as hell. If someone's listening right now and they want to do what you're doing, they want to get into the industry, they want to find their place, whether it's at Shrapnel or another studio, do you have any advice for newcomers that are just enthusiastic but they don't necessarily know where to begin?
Yeah, absolutely. So it really depends on what your skill set is. But if you're interested in getting into like a marketing role, for example, I would be joining Discords and I would be finding opportunities to be like volunteer mods and really get as close as you can to the employees of those studios that are managing the communities and managing the mods, right? Those are folks that generally are kind of a good entryway into, hey, we have a entry-level marketing job open and you've been a great mod for the past couple of years. Like, why don't you come on and we can give you a shot at this, right? That's kind of my first piece of advice, again, for marketing folks. For devs, it's a little different. If you want to be a developer, like you got to teach yourself how to code. But kind of universally, once you're in any sort of position where you're exposed to folks that work in the game industry, where you can, like, it's part of your job to do stuff that helps their job. I've always found that early in my career, trying to find a way to say yes or like be the most helpful human on the earth, no matter what it is that they need done, has really benefited me in my career. So, like, for example, at Nintendo when I was there, I actually started in the customer service group. I was a business analyst for the call center, and my job was to make sure that fewer people called Nintendo about broken Wiis and stuff, and like use the website instead. But as I was doing that, we were building the relationship with Netflix, and bringing Netflix onto the Wii is something that could be used and watched and so forth. And I happened to be like, at the time, I don't know why, but I was like the only person at the company that had been like writing SQL and doing very deep data analysis. And so I was friends with a lot of guys in the marketing department, the product team, and they were like, hey, Tony, we have this need to get off this shitty reporting system and onto something new. And it sounds like you've been doing that in the call center. Right. Would you be willing to come over and help us do this? And like, it was just that literally started my marketing career.
So it sounds like
that opportunity.
Yeah, putting yourself in the place where the opportunity could come to you, yes, instead of being further out from the situation and then being like, well, I'm over here, guys. Instead, you were next door, sort of thing. And yes, by being next door, it meant that they knew both that you had a personal relationship already and that you were able to sort of handle whatever new load they might have.
And taking it out of process, right? Like a big part of where I see junior people in their career fall down is where they like try to wrap a lot of process around everything. And when someone comes to them and it's out of process, they're like, I don't know what to do. I can't do this, right? But if you're that person that the people know that they can rely on, especially if they're out of your org, to come to and say like, hey, this person's gonna help me out. Like they might not even know how to do what it is I'm asking them to do, but like they'll spend some hours figuring it out and at least finding me who to talk to. I'll give you, I still do this in my career. Like I've been in gaming for like 20 years. I managed a ton of people at Amazon, huge budget. I'm not really in my career anymore. And I don't mean that to sound arrogant at all, but we were at a show like a month ago, and one of my colleagues, one of my coworkers, his passport had expired. And he wasn't able to. He had submitted the form wrong or something to get it renewed, and he had to go to Barcelona like literally like 2 days later. And he was like, "Man, I don't know what to do. Like I've not been in this situation before." And my wife's from the Bahamas, and so we travel internationally a lot. And so I'm familiar with like the, oh shit, I don't have a passport problem. And so I just, I spent like an hour and a half, and I just called the passport. There's like a centralized passport line, and you can, if you say the right things like, hey, I desperately need to go to Europe for something that's happened or yada, 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 then they'll set up an appointment for you in a city that has a passport office and let you do it same day. But you have to be able to like get there, right?
Right.
And so I scheduled an appointment for him at San Francisco. We were in Texas, I think. He flew there the next day, got his passport, and went back, right? And I don't use that as an example to my own horn, but like it's just like it's something that's always been with me in my career. If there's a person that you're working with that has a problem that you think you have any ability to help solve or point them in the right direction for, spend the extra hour and a half, whatever, doing that, because it's so important.
Yeah, I think ultimately you're giving value there without the expectation of, oh, this is going to lead to blah X, Y, Z for me, but it's exactly what it does. You give value in that way, and you just will always find that whether that person just trusts you a little more, or they know that they can lean on you when there's something going on, or whatever it might be, there's never any downside to doing that sort of thing.
Humans ask people for help who have helped them before.
Right. Exactly.
And if you are, again, like if you're junior to someone and they have an ability to impact your career, you want them to think of you as the person that is the helpful person that can help solve problems.
For sure.
So those are the first two things, and then more technically, what I've found is just picking up a skill that is, again, technical in nature. Is super helpful or opens a lot of doors, right? So for example, I write SQL because I had to, because at Amazon when I started, you just had to, and that's like opened a lot of doors for me in my career, right? Just like a ton of them.
Yep.
And it's really led me down this path of like live services and being able to understand economies. And like that's, a lot of the value I'm gonna bring to Shrapnel. And so picking up a skill like that, it doesn't have to be data. It doesn't have to be SQL. Copywriting is a very niche thing that's hard. I suck at it. And so I'm always looking for people who are good copywriters. People who have like Six Sigma or project management, or even if it's not Six Sigma, that's such an aggressive or intimidating thing to go and tackle sometimes. But like even just like joining a Discord, finding a community, and offering to manage like a Monday.com or one of those free project management boards. Like if you can walk into an interview as an entry level person that's applying for like a coordinator job, marketing coordinator job, or a chief of staff job or something, and you can walk in and be like, yeah, like, I haven't done a lot of this professionally in my career or paid, but like, here's this Monday board that I manage that like tracks all of the events that happen in my Discord and the kind of the success and impact of those events. More people join, more people come and chat, like all that stuff. Being able to just have that in your back pocket in an interview is super important, because then it's eventually, if you have those skills, they're going to pace the reality of what that person needs. And that's what an interview is, by the way. An interview and the job hunt is all about solving a need that the person who's looking for the employee has in that moment, right? And if you can pace that reality, then you're 10,000 yards ahead of everyone
Exactly.
else.
And being able to combine all the things you just said of not necessarily being completely married to normal process, being willing to go about things in a way that feels like it's a little atypical, or it feels like it's maybe not the shortest path to getting the position you want, but it's still a completely valid one. And then saying, okay, maybe you're going into an interview, but you're saying, oh yeah, there's a content creator that's just like, they're not successful, whatever, but I don't have a Discord myself, but they've got a Discord that they needed some help with. And so they've been paying me, and it doesn't need to be a lot, obviously, but they've been paying me just to help act as a virtual assistant almost, or just to try and round out some of the edges in, some of the hard edges in what they do. That real world experience is gonna be so valuable, even though it's like, well, this is just a random content creator that gets 10 viewers on Twitch and seems so different to this like multi-million-dollar business you might be applying to work at, but the skills are always going to be transferable, and there's always going to be a view of seeing, okay, how has this work here informed what they might be able to do with our company. I think that's really important to tap into. I'd also love to get very quick, any advice that you have for content creators, both ones that want to work with Shrapnel and just in general, content creators in the space right now. Is there anything that you wish they did better or think is really important for them to be sort of tunneled on, focused on?
Yeah, I'm not gonna say anything around like the stuff you guys already know, like consistency is key and all that stuff. The thing that from a publisher, or at least my perspective from a publisher viewpoint or a developer viewpoint, is the ability to separate yourself a little bit from the needs and wants or the way that you generally produce and create content, and being able to hear the goals of the person that you're working with, and like really understand deeply how what you do can, as an input, can help produce the outputs that person's looking for. Again, like there's a problem to solve, there's a pain point, and deeply understanding the pain point that's being addressed, and then being able to use the experience that you've developed, or the audience that you've developed to solve that problem is invaluable, right? Because like a lot of the times we'll go to a creator and they'll have a huge audience, and not a lot of times, there's just different creators where they're like, hey, you tell me what to do and I'll go do that, right? And that's interesting and that's cool because it gives us a lot of control. But a lot of the time we're like, hey, like it's your audience, like you know what these people react to, right? And so be really great if you can come in and understand the goals we have and how you might be able to drive that.
So finding ways for creators to be confident to steer the ship of their own audience and to not necessarily be reliant completely on steer from brand to say, well, we think this is what would resonate most with your audience, but we really need you to be captain of the vessel in a big way there. I feel like that's.
And again, that's a skill. That's a when you talk about like the difference between like the entrenched Web2 people and like folks that have been making games forever and are kind of like nervous about building in the open and stuff. That's another one of those things that's like, hey, it's a little bit out of the comfort zone, but like once you get there, it's just so powerful, right?
Yeah.
And yeah.
Awesome. And the final question, is there anyone in the industry today that you look at what they're doing, like you spoke about Gabe Layden earlier, I'm sure there's a dozen folks out there who you just want to sort of highlight as you think that they're doing something really cool, they could be at Shrapnel, they could be elsewhere, just being a spearhead for the community and the industry in a way that you are a fan of?
What I would go to I'll do archetypes, but I'll use an example.
Sure.
We have this guy at the studio. I think I talked about him earlier, Mark Mercuri. He's our head of platform. This guy is more senior than anyone I've worked with in my career. He was like a GM at Microsoft for a million years, and then he was running big businesses at other companies. And the level of grace that he has with the folks at the studio across the levels of seniority is just incredible. Like we launched a project recently that required him to put in a bunch of like weekend work to build some technology, like almost like a frontline software developer. And his demeanor during that process was like the opposite of what I've expected from someone with his level of experience, right? And so like the archetype that I like to think about is like the very senior person that understands the industry very well and is making impact by virtue of like the decisions they're making that are flowing down to teams that they're running.
Yeah.
People like that who are still able to get their hands dirty and like do stuff are kind of gold to me, right? And like the best people I've always admired and looked up to. Generally, if I find people that have moved from one category of career to another and been successful, again, those people are like really, really interesting to me. So I worked with a guy, Ari Bixhorn, who was he very varied career, but he was Steve Ballmer's speechwriter for a long time.
Wow. Okay.
Right, and then he went from that to running a product team at a freight company that I worked at. Right?
Wow. Okay.
But before, in the genesis of his career, he was a software developer, right? And he's just very articulate, very smart. He moved from this highly technical role into this marketing role, basically, and then back into a product role.
That's incredible.
And so people like that, if you find them and you can either work with them or for them, they're best people in the world to work with and for. You'll learn so much.
Amazing. Cool. So it's been so much fun chatting today. Where can people stay up to date with yourself and Shrapnel? Like, where's the high-level link for where to find you guys?
Absolutely. Shrapnel.com. Real glad we own that. And then on Twitter, we're at PlayShrapnel.
Amazing.
And those are the places where you can get all your updates.
Sweet. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. And I'll put that link in the show notes for everyone to click through to.
Thanks, man. Appreciate you.